3D printers are an amazing thing, right? You load up some filament, you press the go button, and a couple of hours later you have models like this, or even this. Let's not talk about that one. Anyway, it really is that simple, right? Well, yes, but also no. You see, it's difficult. The world of 3D printing is a pretty amazing one, but at the same time it does have its own problems and issues that you are going to have to overcome. So if you have a load of money burning a hole in your wallet and you are looking to buy a 3D printer, chances are you're looking at the model that I have here. This is the Creality Ender 3 Pro. It's one of the many FDM style 3D printers on the market and comes in at a really compelling price. But I do feel like there are a few things that you need to keep in mind if you're considering a printer like this. So in today's video, we are going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the 3D printing process, some of the issues that I had, how I overcame them, and what I actually think of the Ender 3 Pro. So without further ado, let's go. The first question is, why would you choose Creality? Well, sheer mass adoption is the answer. Many of my YouTube friends and real life friends have Ender 3 Pros, so I knew I was in good hands when I went to order one. There are a few places that you can actually buy one of these. You can buy directly from Creality. It is a little bit more expensive, but you do have the choice of shipping from a Chinese or a European warehouse. You can go the cheaper route and buy from Alibaba or Banggood. You will get the cheaper rates there, but do bear in mind you will be paying an import tax. That can be quite a lot of money, so just keep it in mind. But with both of these, you don't really get a returns policy, and if there is a problem, you're having to ship this thing back to China. And that really can be a hassle, not to mention expensive. So what is your other option? Well, Amazon. Amazon is a great place to buy 3D printers, mainly because the prices aren't that much higher than you would find elsewhere, and you get Amazon's amazing returns policy. If you find that there is just something wrong with your printer, you can simply give it to them and send it back here in the UK, and normally they'll refund you or replace it, no questions asked. Of course, I'll leave links in the description down below to buy this printer on Amazon, Alibaba and through Creality themselves, and I'll let you decide which one you think best suits you. So once you receive your printer, it's going to come in a ton of different parts. If you're anything like me, this is pretty daunting because I'm going to be honest, I'm not really a DIY guy. Thankfully, the instructions are pretty easy to read and understand. However, I do recommend checking out some of the other YouTube videos that are out there, I'll link some in the description below, about how to build this printer, because though they do have instructions and they are pretty good, there are just some gaps in the knowledge base, and it is really useful to be able to see it being built in front of you. But actually, the building process was fairly painless. It did take me about 3 hours to print this thing, and it really shouldn't have taken that long. But in the end, I did manage to get it, and I had a 3D printer. I was ready to print, right? No. My printer was, let's say, a little wobbly on its feet. So in order to actually overcome this, you will have to level the bed and also level the whole frame. There are a couple of screws on each side that you're just going to have to undo, push down and get some pressure on that 3D printer, and make sure you just screw that back up again. Once that's done, you should find that it is very level. When you give a little wobble on the top, it shouldn't move anywhere. One thing I will say when building this printer is you really do have to be careful not to over tighten certain parts. Both the rails and the Z, X and Y axis should be able to be moved freely while the printer is turned off. Just give it a little bit of a pull up, a push down, and a pull left and right. This should not meet a lot of tension. If it does, then that probably means that you've over-tightened something somewhere, or you just need to unscrew that wheel a little bit, just to make sure it's sat in the crevice of the metal. I did find that mine did need a little bit of adjusting, but once that was done, I was pretty much ready to print, right? No, you are not. There is still a little bit of work to do before you can do your first print, and that involves bed leveling. Bed leveling is the process of leveling the bed. In order to do this, you will have to turn the printer on and make sure that you auto home it from within its settings menu. Once it's homed, you'll need a piece of paper or even a post-it note, and just to place it on all 4 of the corners of your bed and in the centre as well. And then as you move the head and the bed, it should meet some level of resistance. It shouldn't scrape at the piece of paper or the post-it note, but equally it shouldn't move completely freely. There should be a tiny bit of resistance there. Once you've got that on all 4 corners and the middle, make sure you go around and do it again. Because once you've levelled that all 4 of those corners, you might find that some of the earlier corners are now unlevelled again. So just do that 2, 3, maybe even 4 times until you feel comfortable that your bed is fully levelled. Once that's done, you are basically ready to print now. You have a few different types of materials that you can go with. I highly recommend just getting rid of the filament that came in the box. This is normally a white filament and it's pretty terribly made, pretty cheap, and just will not work. I just couldn't get this to print properly at all. So I went ahead and bought quite a few different types of filament. There's PLA and there's TPU. PLA is the normal plastic that you will find. It's very rigid and actually very, very easy to print as well. I recommend Sanlu and Esun as my providers for both the TPU and the PLA filament. I've got the black, green and some red TPU as well. Once that's all fed in, this might take you a little while. Feeding in can be a little bit of a pain. Just make sure that you bend the filament in the opposite direction and it should feed straight in. So, now we are ready to print. Plug in your SD card, take a look, and there should be a couple of different files on that SD card ready for you to print now. There's a dog, a cat and a pig. I recommend the dog. It is the quickest print and actually I got the best results with it. Simply turn the knob till you find that dog, click enter and wait. This will take about 3.5 hours and you should end up with a complete dog. I've actually found that this print has never failed. No matter what kind of settings I put, I cannot get this print to fail, and that's pretty impressive. Once you've actually printed this, you should be able to see some really nice lines. You shouldn't see any warping in your prints. If you do, then maybe just re-level that bed. If it doesn't adhere properly, you've probably not got your bed high enough. Make sure that you go back with that paper and just double check that you're getting that resistance on each of the corners and in the middle as well. If you're still having issues with this or you just can't get the bed to level, it might be the case that you have a warped bed. The best way to overcome a warped bed is to use something like the BL Touch, which is a complete automatic bed leveling system. It just puts this little piston down and works out the differences in all 4 corners and the middle and calculates that into any print that you do. It's a really nice solution but can add between £40 and £50 to the price of your printer. Maybe that is a small price to pay for your slightly warped print or for having to fiddle around just to get that levelling right. If I only give you one tip as a starting 3D printer, I recommend that you really get stuck in. This is a hobby and it's going to take up a lot of your time. You're going to find that prints will fail a lot and you'll spend a lot of time tinkering to get the settings just right, to get the perfect prints for you. Once you've printed that dog, you're now ready to start to create your own 3D models and start to print them. For this, you will need some kind of computer. This could be a Mac, this could be a PC, and you'll also need some slicing software. There are a ton on the market, but the one I always recommend is Cura. ProSlice works too, but is a little more in depth. There are a ton of different places you can find models from. I recommend going to Thingiverse and just finding a model that you think will look cool. For my first print, I went ahead and tried to design something myself. That was one of these little Spotify keyring logos. I basically went into my CAD program on my iPad, got a Spotify code for a song that I wanted, and just cut out that Spotify code. Once that was done, I exported it, brought it into my slicer and had a play with some of the settings. It's really important to get your settings right in your slicer because 9 times out of 10 this will be why your prints are failing. It could be that it's simply too hot, it's not hot enough, your bed is too hot, your bed is too cold, or it's simply that it's not level. There are a ton of different reasons why prints are failing, and if you want a separate video on how to get the perfect prints and how to diagnose some of these failed prints, then let me know in the comment section down below. Of course, while you're down there as well, if this is the first time that you're seeing my face on your screen, then 1, lucky you, and 2, go down there, hit that subscribe button, smash that bell notification icon so you get notified every time I upload. Anyway, back to the printing. Once you've got everything on your SD card ready to go, plug it into your printer, click go, and one of two things will happen. In a couple of hours or couple of minutes, depending on what kind of print you're doing, you should get a 3D model or a 3D print that is done. But 9 times out of 10 in my testing, I had prints failing all over the shop, and there were a few reasons for it. I'm going to show my experiences and some of the upgrades I think are completely necessary when looking at the Ender 3 Pro. Overall though, I think this is a great starter printer. It's cheap, fairly easy to use once you've sort of worked out all of the kinks, and is highly upgradable. One of the first upgrades that you really should go with is something called the glass bed. By default, you will have a magnetic bed for your Ender 3 Pro, and that's pretty good for being able to just pull it off and get your prints off of the bed easily. But what it does do is make adhesion a little more difficult. When you're actually printing a model, you want that first layer to be as smooth and stuck onto your base as possible. With the magnetic base, I just could not get this bed to stick. I would end up with a springy mess, and it just wouldn't look good. And I'll show you some of the examples of the springy mess that I've come back to from time to time. So getting a glass bed is a really good upgrade, but you do need to make sure that you are also looking after that bed. Using some isopropyl alcohol after each print just to wipe it down, getting rid of any debris and any excess plastic that is there, is the perfect way to clean it and prep it and get it all ready for when you're next printing. I found both with PLA and TPU, your bed should be at around 60 degrees. And if I'm honest, that seems quite high, but here in the UK, the environment around us is so cold that it will start to actually warp around the edges if you don't have it at that high of a temperature. Okay, so that's the first thing. Remembering that glass bed is actually a lot thicker than the magnetic one, so you will need to re-level the bed quite considerably to ensure that you're getting your best prints. PLA should be printing around 210 degrees with your hot end, and about 230 for TPU and other kinds of filaments. It really does depend on what kind of filament, the company that makes it, and the quality of it, and you'll have to play with these numbers to get it just right. One thing I didn't expect to have to do was to actually adjust the hot end. While I was printing, I was finding large globules of burnt and just rubbish filaments stuck to my prints. The main reason for that is actually just because my hot end and the nozzle simply weren't screwed on hard enough. And there was actually a small gap where the filament was able to leak through and absolutely ruin some of my prints. The best way to overcome this is to just take the faceplate off. There's 2 little screws, and as you've heated that nozzle up, just give it a turn and make sure that it is at the tightest that it can go. Normally when it is being shipped, there might be some loosening happening there. And it's all things that you've got to keep in mind, because this is a full-time hobby. 3D printing is not for the faint of heart. If you expect to just be able to press a button, print, go, then this really is not the hobby for you. Overall though, how am I enjoying the Ender 3 Pro? Well, as I mentioned earlier, I absolutely love this printer. It was incredibly easy to build, came very quickly, and I'm able to actually get some really good results. There are a few things that this printer simply doesn't do very well, and that is just because of the way that the prints happen. If you're wanting to do miniatures for D&D or more intricate small parts like keycaps, you will want to change the style of printer that you're going for. You will want a resin printer. This gets you a much higher level of detail, but can be pretty messy and is toxic to both humans and animals if not used correctly. If you'd like a separate video on the differences between a filament and a resin printer, then do let me know in the comments section down below. So do I recommend people go out and buy the Ender 3 Pro? If you have your heart set on 3D printing, yes, definitely go ahead. It is one of the best entry-level printers on the market right now, in terms of its flexibility, in terms of its usability, and just the way that you can upgrade this thing, and it's a great first printer. I won't lie, there are cheaper options on the market, but with this you are getting quality and quantity. So tell me guys, what do you think of this 3D printer? Do you think it's worth the price tag? If so, then let me know in the comment section down below that you're going to be picking one up, and share with me some of the prints that you've managed. Anyway guys, my name's been Robert, this has been Review Clue, and I will catch you in the next one. Adios.